Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back. Today we've got Max with Ybor City Walking Tours, Downtown Tampa Walking
That's right.
Tours, Ybor City Ghost Tour.
Oh yeah.
Did I say Ybor City Ghost Tour twice?
No, you're good.
I said Ybor City Walking Tour
Yes,
and then the
yeah,
Ghost Tour.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, Max, welcome back, my man.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here, and I love the new studio, by the way.
Thank
Great
you,
spot.
man. I appreciate it. We're enjoying it too. It's been fun. I bet you're busy as hell with this beautiful weather.
Man, the weather coming down has been great. A lot of people started finally reaching out to me because this was a tough summer. It's hard to pitch a walking tour when it's a heat index of 101. And people are like, walking? I go, I'll give you water, I'll give you shade, we'll go in buildings. They're like, listen, I just want to lay in the pool.
Yeah, I imagine that's a tough sell.
Yeah.
It was especially brutal this year, right?
Really tough. But now I feel like it's going to be a nice winter. At least the fall's been good to me. And we've been getting busier. Yeah.
Well, especially like today and yesterday, the weather's been incredible.
Great way to walk. And as you know, walking around Ybor is the best way to see it. I mean, it's a
yeah.
small but big city. When your feet are on the old bricks and I bring you inside the buildings, you get to touch the walls and stuff. You're like, man, this is something special.
You know what I love about walking around this area too is you can actually see the little details in the architecture. I forgot what building it is. I actually think it's owned by the county. I think it's HCC something right over here. Some of the detail around the soffit around the building, like this hand painted, incredible stuff. You would never know
really
that
impressive.
driving by in a car.
Yeah, you know how many times people come on my tours are like, I've driven through Ybor a million times, but walking through it just gives you a whole different perspective.
100%, man. Yeah. So, how's it been going with walking tours? You're busy as ever.
Busy as ever. We've even had to do some hiring and stuff like that. We've been
Amazing.
so swamped. We got, private tours, school tours, big vacations coming this way, family reunions, and of course our public tours every day at 11 a.m.
That's amazing.
now,
So public tour at 11 a.m. That's like a meeting spot. People gather.
You can buy a ticket, come along, and just hop on and learn a little bit about Ybor. It's a 90-minute tour. It doesn't take over your whole day. Afterwards, you get to go out in Ybor and you can tell some facts to people.
That's awesome.
A lot of people will tell me, they're like, yeah, it was actually fun because I went to the bar and the bartender's like, oh, what'd you learn? And I had all this stuff to tell them. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sure the bartenders in this area appreciate someone who actually knows what the history of this place is, right?
Well, on that note, you said it when I walked in. You're not wearing the hat. So many people around here know me as the guy with the hat and the guy, like you see me in the picture right here. That's kind of my uniform, if you will. But I walk into bars or something, like, hey, how's it going, Johnny? And they're like, can I help you? Oh, Max. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
They're like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, because they don't recognize me without the uniform on.
Hold on one second. Puts the hat on.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
there
It's
you
like
are, my
I can
man.
see why Superman got away with it.
Exactly,
Clark Kent, the glasses, all that jazz.
Yeah. Very, very simple to hide away. So have you found out anything else about Ybor City that you've added to your tour lately? I mean, I'm sure there's new information coming out about this area
All the time, man. All the time. I mean, first of all, Ybor City is like a germ that's always moving. It's got so many different lives over the years. Of course, we love to talk about the history, but even as we go through, people ask me, so yeah, but what were the 60s like? I'm like, well, the 60s, there were more chickens here than there were people, and then as we got into the 70s, 80s, then of course the club scene and the artist scene showed up. And now today I'm seeing Ybor change into this, I want to say everything old is new. Like everybody moving to Tampa is like, Ybor, I've heard of this place. I want to go see it. And then when they get their hands on it, they're like, I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
You probably know this as a developer. There's a lot of people moving into Ybor.
Well, there's a lot happening too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much growth and there's almost every kind of project going on right now here.
Right.
There's hotel, residential. So people are actually moving here and staying here. That really wasn't the case 5-10 years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, you have some of those little shotgun style homes
Right.
south of here, but no one really wanted to live in Ybor. Now it's like, let's all go. Let's
Exactly.
move.
And when this gasworks thing finally opens, man, this is going to be the spot to be.
Do you think that's going to change some aspects of Ybor City for the worse, just in terms of the amount of traffic? If you look at that development and how much they're going to build,
Yeah.
granted, it's not overnight, right? You don't snap your fingers and there it is. It almost seems like it's just going to be a different place. I don't know.
Well, it's going to have a different style, but everybody that in Ybor City, no matter how old they are or how young they are, they always have their version of Ybor City.
Yeah.
You talk to somebody that came here in 87, they're going to go, oh, the 80s and 90s were where it was really Ybor City. You talk to somebody who's born in 88 like myself, and they're like, actually, man, I loved it when the Centro Ybor started coming and everything started changing,
Right.
So we can only see what's going to happen, but in my opinion, anybody that's putting that much effort into cleaning the city up, like Daryl is, it's only going to be good. We all remember, where that place was, where Gasworks is and all that, and you didn't really go down there. I mean, especially if you were coming to visit Ybor. If you lived around there, sure, whatever. But like, even the people that lived around there were like, man, it's rough around there.
Yeah. Yeah. If anything, I guess it'll just draw new attention to the area. Obviously, that's a great thing for your business and all the other businesses.
Yeah, it helps
here.
tourism. Now, as far as like, the rent's going to go up, but the crime will go down, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the typical, gentrification, if you want to call it, or redevelopment of an area.
Exactly.
I mean, that area used to be a bustling part of the city, kind of down near where Encore is and Central Avenue. That didn't used to just be parking lots, 20, 30 plus years ago.
I'm always an advocate of like less parking lots, more culture and buildings.
Yeah, me too. It's just a natural part of growing up as a city.
Yeah.
You're not going to stop people from moving here, right?
Right, exactly.
So if they're going to come, why not build a project that's beautiful and at least have someone in charge that knows the history, like Daryl, right? He's at least building something significant.
Yeah,
that feels like
appreciates
it's a part.
Ybor. He's been on my tour.
Oh, has he really?
He had a group of people come, and and actually, it's funny, when I got to one of the buildings, I was like, actually, Daryl, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah. He's like, yeah, so the plan here is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just, I think like you said, right, like growing up in Ybor and kind of coming to this area all the time as a kid in the 90s, it feels like a different place today, but it's the same footprint. You know what I'm saying? It's the same 7th Avenue, the same few blocks. I'm just imagining in the future this huge new area, but I don't know.
Well, the good news is that we are one of only 3 National Historic Landmark Districts in Florida, so it'll never change completely. It'll never be like Coca-Cola presents Ybor.
Yeah.
It'll be
Thank
Ybor
God.
City with some investors involved.
What are the other 2 in Florida?
St. Augustine, obviously.
Right.
And then there's some admiral homes around the Panhandle that were used during the Civil War that swayed the war back towards the Union, changing the course of American history. So in order to get that designation, you have to change American history for the better, and Ybor is one of the 3.
Do you find through your research of Ybor City, Tampa history, all that stuff, you're finding out about other areas as well?
Yeah.
Like that information.
Oh, I'm always learning. Nobody, I don't care how long they've been studying, will tell you I know everything about Tampa's history.
Yeah.
I constantly even tell people on my tour, ask me as many questions that pop into your head, because if you give me something I don't know, you're going to make my evening. I'm going to go home and look it up and learn something new. And even the people that I meet around here, because, like I said, everybody has their version of Ybor. I ask them, so when did you move here? How long were you here? Tell me like some of your favorite stories. Tell me some of your worst stories. It's, like I said, an ever-moving germ.
So you get that too. You get the guy, I used to live here in the 80s
All the
and
time.
I want to come back and check it out.
Exactly. And they're like, it ain't what it was. And I'm like, well, tell me how it was.
Yeah.
I like the perspective from all angles, because Ybor was a big melting pot. And we talked about this last time, all the immigration that came this way and put it almost every little flavor of their own country into this town. And that's why I feel like it's so unique, because if you go to like Savannah, you got like that old Southern kind of feel. And I love Savannah, Charleston and all that. They're all great places. New Orleans has their style, but Ybor has almost like a accumulation of all those styles, and they put it right in this little tiny town that changed the course of American history.
It really did. And imagine what a crazy place that was, right? You think about the movie like Gangs of New York and how all those cultures mixed together and fought each other. I mean, I would guarantee in Ybor City in the late early 1900s, there was
tension.
Gang stuff going on.
Oh, yeah, there was tension. And it not just from the cultures, but there were gangs. As you probably know, I see you got the Mafia book right here. Scott Deach is actually a good friend of mine. Like, we sit down for coffee and cocktails and cigars all the time. And he told me, he's like, man, it was literally the Wild West of the South. It was pretty wild around here.
You talk about a guy that knows the history and the culture, and especially in the crime scene. That guy is incredible. We had him on the podcast. Great guest.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I mean, he knows everything. In fact, he could probably conduct some sort of a mafia tour. And I think he mentioned he does do
mafia tours. And actually, I've helped him out with a couple once in a while. Scott will tell you he's a fantastic author, but even his opinion would be like, yeah, you're a pretty good tour guide. I'm like, you do all the writing, I'll do all the talking. How's that?
Yeah, there you go. That's right. Yeah, you certainly have the personality for it. That's for sure. Man, so we were talking with the landlord of this building. We actually had him on the show, Carlos Molnar with Soul Design Studio. I was telling you before we started the podcast, he renovated the whole building.
Yeah.
When they were under renovation, they were cutting out a section of the entrance, and the entire floor dropped like 3 inches.
I saw this. I saw
Right?
it. Yeah, you shared this. This was
So
cool.
it was either in his head, he's like, okay, it was a sinkhole or
Yeah.
something else. They dug it up. Smuggler's Tunnel.
That's so cool.
What the hell is what's going on with the smuggler's
Underground
tunnels?
tunnels. Now, I don't know if you know about this, but when Mr. Ybor built Ybor City, of course, he thought, you know, I don't want my city to flood. So he built it up, started piling dirt as high as he could until they can lay the roads. You know, the bricks that are on the floors out there, those are all from ballast boats, which if you're not familiar with that term, like if a captain goes to Baltimore,
The bricks, on
the streets.
the Pentagon bricks, or
no,
the actual
the
street?
ones that are in the streets that say like Baltimore, Augusta, Catskills. They were brought here on ballast boats, which like if a captain goes to Catskills, New York, and he unloads his ship, you can't bring your ship unbalanced out to sea. It will tip over. So they put heavy things like bricks in your cargo area just to weigh your ship down. And then it's smooth sailing. When you arrive in Tampa Port, he goes, I don't need these bricks anymore. Keep them. So literally, they just got free bricks that are still on the floor right now.
Oh, that's incredible.
And there's something else that's even more incredible that they used all the time on ballast boats. Granite. Which, as you know, as somebody who's in real estate, granite is not useless anymore. It was back in the day. But all the curbs of Ybor City are made out of granite.
Yeah.
You'll notice it as you walk around. And the granite slabs go down about 6 feet under the ground. They're huge.
Holy shit.
That's like an iceberg effect. You can only see this much of it. That's, by the way, my go-to at the bars. Whenever somebody's like, oh, Mr. Tour Guide, tell me something I don't know. I go, your curb's made of granite. And they look at it, they go, oh, it is made of granite.
Is that why when my wife parks my car, it scratches
Yes.
off the rim so bad? Because it's granite?
I can always tell who's visiting Ybor or who's been here before just how they park their car on the wall, on the granite there. But yeah,
Oh
eventually.
my God, look at these tunnels.
Exactly.
So how extensive are we talking about?
Oh, they were pretty. I mean, they had tile floors because the prostitutes going from spot to spot, they don't want to get their shoes dirty. They had to put a little tile down there. When they were discovered, they thought, oh, these might be like sewers or something, and then they realized, oh no, this is pretty intricate. This is a whole system that goes to the port. I don't know how far his went that was down here, but also it was probably for hiding booze or moving people around.
Well, what they hit was an area that had actually been filled in at some point with coquina concrete or coquina mix, which I know is a form of concrete they used about 100 years ago.
Wow.
So it was filled in at some point. What we're looking at now, these are
that's a pretty good one right
finished
there.
off and obviously not filled in. When did the tunnels start to become known and found out? I feel like this is a recent thing.
From what? Well, of course, anybody in the know knew it back in the day, but
Right.
I think it became more like during urban renewal in the 60s when they started kind of knocking down casitas and building HCC and stuff like that. And they started discovering these things, and that's when it became known, like, in the public's eye. You know, back in the day, though, everybody knew about the tunnels, but there's funny stories about all this kind of stuff. I mean, when they would come break up gambling rings and stuff, they just go down in the tunnels and hide. Look, that's pretty good. I don't know how tall that guy is, but that's plenty of room for like people to sneak around. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Live by Night with Ben Affleck.
Yes.
That's, I don't want to give away the ending or anything, but the tunnels are pretty big in the ending.
That actually is a phenomenal movie
Yeah.
if you want to know about what Ybor was probably like back then, 100 plus years ago.
I thought they did a really, really good job. I wish they would have shot it here, which they almost did, but things happen.
Politics, I guess.
Politics is
Apparently,
exactly what
Georgia paid that movie studio more. So what they ended up doing in Georgia was building Ybor City in some rural town.
It was
in Georgia.
exactly like Ybor.
Yeah.
They even had the Lector and all that stuff in the factory.
I
It was
know, they
pretty
should have
good.
done it here, but it's all good.
Is
We'll
what
get
it
some new movies and some books.
I got a
I'm
feeling
hoping.
that we're going to have a lot of that coming up pretty soon.
So these tunnels, what were they originally built for? I keep seeing like, hey, they're not smugglers' tunnels, they're sewers. That's what they were.
Yeah.
It was an infrastructure.
Sewers are just sewers. That's
Yeah.
all it is. Just a
Yeah,
couple of
yeah.
sewers down there.
You don't know nothing.
Yeah, no. But I mean, I might have been kind of both. But really, though, they were. I mean, everybody pictures Florida. They think, sea level. Go to Miami, they're like below sea level. But Tampa, actually, there's a part in Ybor City that's about like 30 to 40 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
There's basements all around Ybor City.
I noticed that actually on the drive here today. I was on Adamo Drive driving up north. I forgot what street, but I was like, dude, I'm going uphill. Huh,
Yeah.
interesting. I figured it was natural.
Florida
It's probably
hill, yeah.
part natural, part.
It was part built up. Hell, Mr. Ybor, his factory, which is I call it Mr. Ybor's industrial complex. It has a couple big buildings that he built there, but his factory is built on a big hill because, of course, like I said, he thought if my city floods, flood away from my factory.
Right.
And I get people to that hill and I go, look at that big hill you're on top of, and they all laugh because like they're from Germany or you know they're from
anywhere but
Rio de Janeiro, and they're looking at this going, this is not a hill. But San Francisco, they're all like, come on, man. I go, this is a Florida hill. But yeah, there are basements throughout these places. There's most of the original buildings have basements.
Yeah. Yeah, you can actually see the windows on the block north of here on 8th Avenue. There's a building kind of where Rock Brothers is, and you can see like the little windows down in the basement.
Yep.
And like you said, we're built up pretty high. Those might stay dry. I don't know.
In fact, of course, storm surges and all that stuff are issues, but like we don't get a lot of flooding, knock on wood.
Right.
We're out here in Ybor City. It's also, I think those old bricks help because the water just kind of seeps into them. Because like I said, it's just dirt on top of each other underneath those bricks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that helps.
I think it does. And I'm not a scientist or a meteorologist or any of that, but I think it does. Because you'll notice, if it even rains a little bit in South Tampa, the place is flooded.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I love South Tampa, but it's flooded completely. Even if it rains for an hour, you're like, I got to get a canoe out,
I kind of have a theory about that. If you look at old pictures, just pull up like, South Tampa old picture or Palmacia old picture.
Yeah.
You'll notice that area, the way nature built it, right? It was a bunch of scrub, pine trees, palmettos,
Swamp.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there was not a lot of oak trees. My theory, something would tell me that a lot of these oak trees, with all the leaves they drop, there's a good picture on the left. There's Seminole Heights. There's not one oak tree. You go to Seminole Heights now, right? How many oak trees are there?
Exactly.
Developers about 100 years ago in the 20s and 30s, when all these areas of Tampa were laid out, they obviously planted trees, oak trees being the number one tree that was planted.
Yep.
Now we have a huge tree canopy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it.
I think actually Tampa has the largest tree canopy on earth.
Wow.
Like any major city. So it's an amazing asset.
I told you,
right?
I learned
It's
something
phenomenal.
new every day. I told
There you go.
you.
Pop that in the tour.
I might.
But yeah, I think a lot of our stormwater issues are because of all those leaves, man.
Probably. You might be right about
that. The area's
that.
not used to it.
Nope.
Plus the concrete and the sidewalks and roadways, all that.
Plus, Florida in general, if you go way back to even like the Native Americans and the Spanish conquistadors, they were like, this is not a great place. Mosquitoes and monsters all over the place.
There was an article written, I think like 20 years ago, about old Tampa, and it listed a few old families in there. Ours was in there, the Grecos, and I think, some of the other classic, old Italian last names were in there as well.
Right.
But they were talking about how like everyone that moved here and wrote back to their homeland was like, dude, this place sucks.
Yep.
Like the mosquitoes are horrible. There's alligators everywhere. We're just trying to make it by in this swamp. Like no one was raving about this place in history ever.
In my downtown tour, I talk a lot about Fort Brooke. Andrew Jackson developed Fort Brooke to fight the Seminole Indians, and then Zachary Taylor used it, and then it was used during the Civil War. After the Civil War, everybody got the hell out of here. They were like, dude, there's nothing to do down here. It's hot, it's muggy, there's mosquitoes everywhere, and there's literally snakes and alligators everywhere I sleep. It's nowhere to be. So before Mr. Ybor built Ybor City, the estimated population of Tampa was like 600 or 700 people.
Yeah.
That's it.
No
and even we're not so how sure that number is either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that even sounds like an exaggeration.
Yeah, right.
I also read that there was a lake or a pond on 7th Avenue, kind of where Central Ybor is.
So it was more like, I want to say 9th Avenue. Do you know where the castle, the building? So building.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, right, yeah. No, I tell people all the time, you can admit you've been to the castle. It's okay. But the castle was built on a freshwater spring. And the funny thing about it, when they built it, they forgot to cap the spring. So the water kept on flowing. And if you go by the castle now, you'll notice it's kind of unlevel. It kind of goes like this. It has to be re-leveled every like 15 years or 20 years or something.
Damn.
And there's a lot of water damage all over the windows because the aquifer underneath it used to build up with pressure and water would leak out of the building looking like it's crying.
Oh
So
my God.
Ripley's, believe it or not, nicknamed it the Weeping Building.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Which I always thought is a good nickname for the castle, the Weeping Building.
It makes sense in more ways than one, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler, hit that picture of old downtown Tampa. Let's talk about the history of downtown.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you do your downtown history
Yeah,
walking
I
tour.
love this photo. This is great. What is this? That's Franklin Street. Yeah, there's the Tampa Theater right over there. I
Go
think.
try to make that bigger. First of all, look at this guy up here. Just
Yeah.
posted up,
yeah.
checking out the view.
The Watchman.
I look at a picture like this and I think,
Damn, that's
it
a
was
great
better
picture.
back then.
That is a great, great photo.
You ever
This
think
must be
that
the
about
20s.
Tampa? You look at the urban area, although
was.
in a lot of urban areas around the country, you know, in the 1940s and 50s with suburban lifestyles and cars, and
Right.
people moved out of the city, right? There was
Yeah.
urban decay. But I look at a photo like this and I'm like, dude, that looks like more fun than it is now.
I guarantee. Well, the city was the place to be. Like as you said, there was no Carrollwood, there was no Citrus Park, and nothing against those places, but this was the only place you could even be. And I love the trolley going right down the middle. God, this is a great photo. In the 20s, though, downtown Tampa and Ybor City, we were like the Manhattan of the South. We were one of the fastest growing cities because of the cigars and, all the people moving this way and the development. But the crash of the cigar industry in the 30s and 40s kind of hurt that quite a bit. Plus, like you said, suburban movement. The Tampa Theater used to be the hot spot to be. It had air conditioning, it had moving pictures. But then by 1950, everybody moved to the suburbs and had a TV in their house.
Right.
Why would I go to the movie theater? By the 1960s, the land beneath the Tampa Theater was worth more than the building itself. But thank God that a bunch of historians and artists protested their destruction of it, and now it's a historic. Building.
It sat vacant for a long time.
For a long time, yeah. And now, honestly, it's kind of more of a. I think it gets. I don't know this for sure, but I think it gets grants because it's a historical building, and that's why they do like, hey, we do free silent films. Just bring a donation. So that's kind of cool.
It's great too because every time I drive by, there's something going on, right?
All the time.
Whether it's a field trip for children to learn about the history or see a show, I love that it's constantly in use, which is awesome.
One of my favorite places, and I love that there's more stuff going on around it now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Back in the day, I remember like Tampa Theater and the Hub, and that was it. That was like, and you didn't really want to hang out after 9 p.m. kind of thing,
No, not at all. No, you do your work downtown, you go home.
Now it's Gin Joint and Anchor Tavern and all kinds of stuff. Malio's is over there now too. I mean, there's lots of cool stuff.
You know what I just noticed too? Look at the old street lights, those classic old street lights. My impression was those were only the style of the Ybor City, right? So those were all around Tampa.
They were around Tampa, but they originated in Ybor City.
Now, were those electric or oil?
They were oil to start. Now, I think by then they were electric for sure. Electricity actually kind of popped up pretty quick in Tampa around the same time as it developed. People are surprised to hear that electricity was around in like the 1800s. But I mean, Thomas Edison.
Wasn't the Tampa Bay Hotel one of the first hotels in the South to have electricity?
It was the first building in Florida to have electricity. Henry Plant himself hired Thomas Edison to wire it. Now, you know about Plant and Flagler, I'm sure. So when Flagler found out about that, he goes, well, then I need to get somebody to wire my hotel. And he hired Nikola Tesla to do it.
Tesla or Edison, those are your two companies you could either use back in the day for electricity.
I love the whole rivalry between Edison and Tesla, and then Flagler and Plant all kind of came together around electricity. It's kind of awesome.
I was just at a wedding 2 weeks ago at the Breakers. So that was built by Flagler. And they have an entire section in the hotel that has a timeline of the building in Palm Beach and how that was all built.
Yeah.
What an incredible story.
Yeah.
There were really only a few men back in the day that came to this mosquito-infested swamp like we're talking about that were bold enough to create something here.
Got to be bold.
Had Plant not came to Tampa and brought the railroad and all of, the hotel and everything he did, this picture probably wouldn't exist, right?
100%.
Like he really was one of the founders of Tampa, the city.
I call him the godfather of Tampa.
Yeah, and he was before Ybor, right?
Before Ybor, yeah. Luckily, Ybor came almost right after Plant. So it was pretty much, almost a hand-in-hand thing. They didn't know each other, but Plant building the railroad and the hotel and the port and all that, and then Ybor was like, oh, they have a port and a railroad? Hell, I might check that place out. He came here by accident. I don't know if you know this story, but he didn't even know. He was heading to Galveston, Texas. He was supposed to go to Galveston and build a cigar factory over there. He was like, I'm just going to build a factory and retire, whatever. And, this was 1885, right before Galveston got hit by a hurricane. So it was a booming city. But a friend of his who kind of grew up around him named Gavino Gutierrez, which there's a plaque of him on the Riverwalk. Gavino Gutierrez was a importer of fruit in Manhattan. And somebody told him there's a giant jungle of guava in Florida called Tampa. By the way, I think that's where we got our nickname Guavaween for a Halloween celebration. But Gavino's like, I got to get my hands on that fruit. So he came down here and he's like, there's no fruit here. What the hell is this? And he's like, all right, I'm going back to Manhattan. But his storm detoured his boat down to Key West where Mr. Ybor had his kind of newish factory. And he went and sat down with Mr. Ybor. And Mr. Ybor told him, like, yeah, I'm going to move to Galveston. I don't really like Key West that much. He was also there with Ignacio Haya, the Hotel Haya. And he's like, you guys, there's this place I just came from. It's got like fresh water everywhere. There's nobody living there. There's a new railroad. And they were like, yeah, let's go check it out. And the rest is history, as they say.
Amazing. And the land was probably dirt cheap, right?
Well, actually, no. You want to know, the man that owned the swamp that Ybor is developed on was a man named Captain John Leslie. Now, Captain Leslie, captain during the Civil War, but more known for the Seminole Indian Wars. He chased a lot of Native Americans out of the swamp, so the government said, hey, keep the swamp. It's yours. And Captain Leslie was like, he was kind of ready to retire. He was getting older, and he's wanted to sell his swamp. Plus, for lack of a better term, not a big fan of the Spaniards because they were all over Florida and stuff. So this Spaniard walks into his office, Mr. Ybor. He's like, I'll buy your swamp for $5,000, which back then, that's a ton of money. And Captain Leslie's like, I'd never sell my swamp to a Spaniard for less than $9,000. And Mr. Ybor's like, that's too much. I'm going to Galveston. So the Chamber of Commerce of Tampa actually funded, Captain Leslie went to the chamber, like, this guy wants to buy my swamp, but, I don't know, he doesn't have enough money. So they're like, oh, we'll pay some. So they paid $4, Ybor paid $5. Here we have Ybor City.
Amazing. So the local chamber helped facilitate that deal.
They were known as the Board of Trade, which I know that sounds very prestigious, but they were mostly like alligator farmers and fishermen.
I was going to say, back then, imagine that group of guys.
Yeah,
right?
But Captain Leslie happened to be one of them, and he goes to them like, I got this proposition that's going here. If you guys want to kind of, maybe step in. And they're like, we'll pay. We got $4,000, and there you go.
And so he purchased 40 acres.
40 acres for $9,000. And immediately just wrote to everybody in the cigar industry he ever liked or hated. He said, let's put all our differences aside. Come build a brand new factory in my city. In fact, I'll pay for the factory to be built. You don't have to pay me back any money for 10 years. Let's turn this place into an industry town.
Amazing. So it was almost Galveston, Texas.
Yeah, and imagine he would have been washed away with the storm. Because 1900, that major hurricane came through and pretty much destroyed Galveston.
Well, wasn't there a huge hurricane here in the early 20s? Can you look that up, Tyler?
Yeah.
I think 1921.
21, I believe, because I remember when we had the big scare come in, and they were like, it hasn't been 100 years.
Right.
Now, that was a little before in fact, I'm a little curious about this one, too.
So the one that hit Galveston must have been before this one.
It was in the year 1900. And if you like to read, there's a great book called Isaac's Storm about that hurricane. It's all about the meteorologist of Galveston who was like, this storm ain't going to be nothing. And then, of course.
Hit damage photos, Tyler, right there.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So they have all these St. Pete Yacht Club, Ybor Channel. Look at that.
Look at that right there. The car's underwater.
That's crazy. Palmetto. That's another area I wanted to ask you about, too. Not to
of course,
dip out of the hurricane subject, but Palmetto, man, that is a really, really kind of cutesy little area right south of Ybor City, very close to downtown. You can see some old bungalows and brick streets. That looks like it has a historic
Of course,
thing going on, too.
Definitely. And I mean, anything that just was downtown, Palmetto, South Tampa, that all became almost the suburbs. Which, South Tampa, I guess you can kind of call a suburb.
For sure. I used to live in Swan Estates, off Church and Azeel. I was that black and white house on the corner, and the guy behind me named Joe, I forgot his last name. He had lived there. He actually grew up there. He's I used to climb that oak tree when it was yay big. And he said that when his family, he was from West Tampa. He said that when his family moved out of West Tampa to Swan Estates, it was like they were leaving town.
Exactly.
Well, good luck out in the suburbs.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, it's completely a part of the city. It's hilarious.
Well, that's how cities grow. But I love that picture right there. That's wild.
Man, so that was an extremely destructive hurricane. This is the hurricane everyone references when they say, we haven't been hit by a major storm in 100 years. Yeah. This is the one they talk about.
There's your boy right there.
Yeah, there's the old hardware store. Look at the damage, though.
Yeah. That's King Greco's hardware store. That's funny.
Now, obviously, we don't, they didn't have building codes like we do now.
Right.
So I'm sure the damage is a little bit exaggerated.
Yeah.
But my grandfather told me that there was water up to the Columbia restaurant during this storm.
I'm sure.
He was born in 1933. This was a little before his time. But obviously, talking to his parents, apparently this was a bad one.
Oh, man, I can only imagine. I mean, that's pretty bad right there. Look at that.
Now, Ybor was long gone by this time, no?
By the 20s?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Ybor, he passed away in 1896.
1896.
Yeah. Only 10 years after he arrived here. He was 68 years old when he did this whole, you don't have to pay me for 10 years thing. I mean, most of the competition was like, guy's 68. He ain't going to see any money. But I think that was more of an idea to have something roll over to his kids.
That's a funny thing. Yeah, 68 years old. You don't have to pay me back. Everyone's like, I'll take that deal, bro.
Exactly, dude. People,
You ain't gonna
besides,
last,
he
man.
was one of the best cigar makers in the world. They're like, yeah, let's give this thing a try, you know?
Well, did you notice too that old picture of downtown Tampa on the left-hand side was a huge Have a Tampa
Yeah,
cigar.
I did see that. Have a Tampa.
Now so talking about the timelines between Ybor City, right, where we are now, and then downtown, those were two separate cities.
Yeah.
100
Ybor
years
was
ago.
its own city.
Its own city
Yeah.
with its own police force.
Own mayor and all that.
Everything.
It was annexed pretty quickly once the money started flowing in. West Tampa didn't get annexed till 1925. It was its own city.
What was the deal with West Tampa? Was that like a secondary cigar manufacturing area?
Bingo. Yes, it was like they were like, well, we can do it too, and they did. You probably know this. They have tons of factories still in West Tampa.
Yeah, I mean some of the biggest ones in the city.
Yeah, and some of the similar names. I mean, you'll see Fuente, you'll see Sanchez Haya, those kind of names over in West Tampa. But yeah, West Tampa was it was blowing up as big as Ybor. In fact, when they funny enough, when they annexed it into Tampa, Florida, the mayor of West Tampa announced like, "Oh, Tampa is now going to have one of the fastest growing cities under its umbrella." And then, of course, like 4 years later, the Great Depression, or it might have been 1927, not 1925, but yeah, it was around then.
Yeah,
it was right before the Great Depression.
A lot of cities got wrecked. You
Yeah.
know, it's interesting to think about what would have been. If the depression didn't happen, would a lot of these buildings still be there, right? Because if you go to West Tampa now, a lot of the buildings are gone, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because they're so gorgeous. I mean,
I
look
do
at this
think
theater,
that,
Sicilian Theater.
Yeah.
mean,
I
it's
think that
amazing.
eventually, you know how Tampa's kind of invested in Ybor. They're investing a lot in, Channel Side and things like that. I think their next move should be West Tampa.
I think so too. I just drive around there and I see opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it's a cute little downtown. It's a beautiful little spot.
Plus, that's the place to go for good Spanish food.
Oh my God.
Yeah, everybody's like, where do I get good Cuban food in Ybor? I go, you don't. Go to West Tampa.
Yeah, West Tampa. There's still
Although-
some old families living there, man.
I know, and I told Daryl himself, I'm like, there's a lot. He's like, what do you think about what's going on? I go, whatever you do, build a Cuban restaurant, because I don't know who wants to take on the responsibility of doing it, but like if we had like a La Tarazita in Ybor, I'd be there every day, and so would everybody
100%.
else.
Why, you think people are like, I don't want to go into the Cuban food.
I
I don't
don't
know if I'll
know.
do it right.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do it right if you're gonna do it. Nobody
High
wants
stakes.
Yeah,
Lot of eyes on
exactly.
you.
Right. If you're doing good Cuban food that's like street food, rice, beans, ropa vieja, then you got to do it right.
Was talking about we had on Melissa, on the podcast, and she's kind of a foodie, food photographer. She was a great guest, but we're talking about Tampa restaurants and like, there's Eulalie, which is kind of a Florida-esque restaurant. Obviously, we have the Columbia, Carmine's. There's plenty of great Tampa restaurants.
Yeah.
But some sort of a hub, we were just talking, would be really cool. Think of like Armature Works or a food hall where
Right.
you go in and there's like deviled crab.
Yeah.
And like a
that would
very
be cool.
Tampa themed
Yeah.
Cuban sandwiches. The
Keeping
whole
it
thing.
all Tampa would be cool. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard to do, especially, our food scene. We have a few, like the Cuban sandwich, the devil crab. We have a few specific things that are like Tampa, born and bred, but it's not like New Orleans. We're like New Orleans, you can name
Right.
25 different dishes that are New Orleans, and I think that it could work, and it would be a good idea. And like I said, if they can do it right, I would be there all the time.
That's the question, right? Do
Yeah,
it right.
do it right.
Yeah, you'd have to kind of want to, build something like that and create something
Exactly. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a numbers guy, but it might cost a lot of money and effort,
like that. Go to that picture on the bottom left, Tyler. Do you know what the renovations are going on?
No,
at this building here?
I'm interested in it too. And a friend of mine lives next door to it, but I know they're restoring the clock tower. I don't really know anything else that they're doing. I don't know specifically this building, but I know that another one that's on Armenia, they're going to be making into apartments. And then St. Leo College is on one of them. There's like,
on Howard, I believe.
yeah, Howard, yeah.
Yeah, so as far as I know, the Clock Tower Cigar Factory is going to be turned into a sort of wine venue.
Cool.
So it's some sort of a winery. You go there, you have tastings, and you have some sort of experience. But it's in this old cigar factory, which I believe is the tallest cigar factory in the history of the city.
Makes sense.
Right?
It definitely does. I mean, do you see how tall that is? And do you know why they had such tall lookout spots for they called it a cupola, and it was because it was all Cuban tobacco until the embargo, of course. And back then, like there wasn't a text message like, "Hey, I'll arrive on Tuesday," or like not even like a phone call. Really, you get a letter that would say your tobacco should arrive on Tuesday, and then the person would have to sit up there all day Monday and Tuesday. And when they saw, from the looking glass, they saw the ship coming in, they'd ring a bell, and people would rush to the port as quick as they could because. Well, the tobacco wasn't paid for in advance because what if the ship sinks? All your tobacco's under the sea.
Right.
You'd have to pay the guy, get the tobacco, and go. So if somebody else shows up there and buys your tobacco, the captain doesn't care. He's like, okay, you got enough money here? Take it.
Is that how tobacco was bought with all these manufacturers, almost like
Exactly.
an auction style?
Well, you had your contract, kind of. But, I mean, back then a contract was as good as whoever has the cash. So if you didn't get there in time and somebody was standing there with the cash, the captain just wants to get his money and go back to sea. Yeah, so he's like, I'll take the money, you take the tobacco, get out of here. And that's it.
There was so much happening at the port.
Right.
Right. We had a military base here, Fort Brooke. Obviously, there was some sort of ships back then with the Civil War. Then you have passenger lines coming to visit the area, and you also have tobacco and shipping. Has there been like historic shipwrecks found in the bay?
That's a great question.
Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about it, and that just made my whole day. I'm going to look that up.
Wouldn't you imagine there
has to be some stories
down there? Or
there's got to be something down there.
Something.
I mean, even like Cuban fishermen before Tampa Town and all that. Cuban fishermen used to come here, and they'd just get as much grouper and shrimp and stuff and go, we have Florida grouper, and sell it in Cuba, when Cuba was kind of a thing, before Tampa was really developed. So it was, a very popular spot. Tampa Bay grouper and all that was
That's
like
a
very
long
popular.
haul for a grouper.
Yeah, but I mean, you think about it, if you look at the map, like the north, like Havana is like a straight shot to Tampa Bay. It's perfect.
It's really not that far.
Right.
That's what's weird.
That's
like
why it works.
It's 90 miles from Key West.
Yep.
Which Ybor had a little
Ybor had a spot
down
there, yeah, but it was not working out for him down there.
Yeah, it's not that far. Interesting though. That's something I've actually never heard of.
I'm gonna have to look into that. Shipwrecks of Tampa Bay.
How could there not be hundreds?
It's gotta be. Yeah, definitely something to look into.
The only reason why I would think there wouldn't be a ton of ships, there's really no coral reef to get stuck on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like how would a ship go down? A storm maybe?
Storm. Hell, there was pirates. Never historic Tampa shipwrecks. Let's
About
see
to
what we
Google
got.
it and find out.
This is live, people. Look at that. No, that can't be. Anna Maria.
That's
Anna Maria, I don't know. A
Oh,
bridge. The bridge collisions. That's probably something that happens too. I know the Skyway Bridge, the original one, did collapse from a ship going through it.
Were there any sort of bridges? Probably definitely not over Tampa Bay where the Skyway was, right? That didn't exist.
When the Skyway Bridge accident happened, I was not born yet, but my mom tells me stories. She's like, there was so much fog that morning that people literally didn't see. So they would just drive their cars right off the bridge. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible thing.
So what is this, Tyler? This looks like a more modern ship.
Yeah, that might be the old Skyway, which when you're on the Skyway, you look to the right there. If you're going, outside of Tampa, you look to the right, you can see the old Skyway. It's like a fishing pier now, but the old Skyway Bridge is there.
There's a Civil War shipwreck at the top, which
look
is
at that.
super fascinating. Look at that.
That's cool.
Now, look at the coral, though.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem right to me.
It says Tampa St. Pete Clearwater.
Yeah, it does. But
Investigating.
where have you seen a coral reef like that?
This was in 2018. So I don't know. I mean, if you're deep enough, you might get something like that.
Treasure Seekers, Tampa Bay History Center, though. The History Center has an exhibit, man. Click on that.
Yeah, actually, the History Center does a great job when it comes to old boats and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the spot I've seen. They just they have a bunch of old ones.
If anyone has not visited the Tampa Bay History Center, that really is if you're into history,
amazing thing.
They've set that up in a great way.
The Native American history, especially, is
I
really
love
great.
the fact that they go back that far.
Yeah.
It's not just about like, Cigar City and Henry Plant. No, they go back
All the
far.
way back.
Talk about the Indian cultures that were here.
I would say that their Native American exhibits are their best part.
Yeah.
I mean, the animatronics they have and stuff, it's really a great spot.
Really a fascinating place when you think about it. Pirates, shipwrecks, in the 1800s in this swampy area. What life must have been like back then.
Amazing.
We were digging in a little bit into the Native American culture in Safety Harbor. Tobaga, that culture was amazing. I mean, they had cities around Tampa Bay, and apparently that is the culture that protects us from these crazy hurricanes.
Urban legend that they blessed the land. They kept us safe from all the hurricanes.
Do people ask you that on the tour?
I talk about it on my downtown Tampa Ghost Tour because there are sprinkles of remains from the Tocobaggans and the Calusa that were used. When people came this way, settlers that were Spanish and English, they kind of just saw the big, about the big bone mounds.
Yes.
Yes. So they found these bone mounds and they're like, yeah, well, what are we gonna do with all this stuff? They're like, well, grind it down. Let's make it into a binding agent, and they made the roads.
Oh, Lord.
So I tell people, like, hey, if you start hearing drums on this tour, there ain't no marching band around. The remains are still all over the place around
Crazy.
here. Yeah.
Literally built the roadways with.
I guess this is kind of a good segment to talk about. It is spooky season. We're so busy with these ghost tours.
I would imagine you are.
This is
Here
the
in
busiest
October.
September, October we've ever had.
Beautiful weather.
Yes, beautiful weather. Plus, the downtown ghost tour, we've gotten a lot of traction on because I started it a couple years ago, and I was just kind of like, it'll be like something I do on the side to have a little fun, talk some news stories. But it's gotten really popular. The reviews started flowing in. I mean, the Tampa Theater, Henry Plant's Hotel, Sacred Heart Church, the Hotel Florida Inn has a little mafia history behind it, and then of course the Oaklawn Cemetery. The Oaklawn Cemetery has Mr. Ybor buried there. It has the very first mayor of Tampa, Lancaster. He's buried there. It has Charlie Wall and John Wall and the Wall family all buried there. It's mafiosos, yes. It's one of those funny places because, some cemeteries, like, in Ybor, we have the Italian cemetery and all that stuff like that where they keep it very specific. This one was like everybody, slaves, slave owners, politicians, Civil War heroes. There's a mass grave from Yellow Fever.
Why was it so mixed up like that? I feel like that's not typical at all.
Not typical at all. I think that it was just kind of like one of those things where they didn't really have their identity yet, Tampa. They had the Civil War people are buried in there as well as like slaves because they were like, well, where are we going to put all these people? And the AME church that's next to it had an African-American specific graveyard, but they've since moved all that. And the AME church is still there, which is a huge historic spot. If you want to talk about progressiveness from civil rights aspect, AME church has had, it's hosted MLK, Jesse Jackson, Bill Clinton, all these people that were trying to do progressive things in the South. And it was built in 1868, an African-American church in the South in 1868.
That's right. During the Civil War.
Right after the Civil War.
Right after the Civil War.
I mean, like, that's pretty bold to be like, okay, so we're all emancipated, let's build a church.
I mean, immediately.
Yeah, in the South. Like
how does the Jackson House play into this in your history tour? I'm sure people ask questions about that.
Of course.
Yeah.
The Jackson House, I bring it up in my downtown tours because you can't help it. There's actually a nice, there's a monument, a manhole cover that has all the names of everybody that were at the Jackson House. It's on Zach Street, Zach in Florida, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's, and we go by it and I go, guys, I'd love to bring you all the way down to the Jackson House, but I tell people, don't worry, you can't miss it. If you go down Zach Street, I mean, literally, unfortunately, it looks like if you sneeze next to it, it's going to fall down.
Yeah, they've done some mitigation. They've tried to put some structures inside that basically keep it from falling over. Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do to fix this thing, man.
I know, and I hope that
that's a good picture.
That's a great. That's got to be from the 90s, maybe.
That's probably at least 20 years old.
Yeah, but this is kind of, I think, more. Yeah,
really,
that's not even what it looks like anymore.
I would say the one above that, Tyler.
Right, that one.
I mean, that's
where about
we're at
right.
today.
Yeah,
how are you going to fix that? It's unfortunate. There's a lot of finger pointing, but I think the reality is there's so many things that could have happened over decades that make this the current issue today. Exactly. It's not like one group screwed up or the other. It's really not that. It should have been taken care of.
A lot of people fumbled the ball on.
100%. It's been like the hot potato. Everyone's passed it to one another.
That's a good way to put it.
Apparently, recently, they've come to an agreement with the city and 717. 717 is the neighbor of this property.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen? We were talking before we went live. I don't know how they're going to rebuild it.
I don't either.
What we were saying, and I totally agree with you, is and I would say to anyone is, just go ahead and figure out a way to remove what you can and build a new structure.
That's my opinion.
And repurpose some of those materials and display them. And
a museum would be great.
A museum would be amazing.
Because the names that have gone into this house, it's right, as you know, right across the street from the Union Station railroad stop, where African Americans coming down here and during the segregated South, they needed a place to stay when they performed. And names like Ray Charles, James Brown, Ella Fitzgerald, amazing artists that changed American music, and they stayed in this house.
That's amazing.
It's really, and to me, it's special. And I happen to live near it in the Channelside area, and every time I go by it, I look at it and I'm like, man, I can't believe it's still standing, but I'm happy to see that it's not destroyed yet.
Yet.
Uh-huh.
Well, we'll see what they end up doing. For you on your tours, this is probably too far to walk to, right?
It is. Especially it's like right in between Ybor and downtown. So on my downtown tour, I go by that manhole cover and I make sure to tell everybody, if you go down Sack Street, you can't miss it. I mean, look at that. It's really something to see.
Do you think if it was rebuilt, you would include it in your tour?
Oh,
or
yeah.
just
I'd find a way to do it.
Yeah.
I'd find a way to try and make it, or even if I, anytime. So I'd also do like, if you bring like a bus or like a cart or something, if you do something like that, I try to incorporate it. Just like, I tell the bus driver, like, hey, real quick, let's go down this way. And I tell people, I go, now this is one of the most famous houses. I promised my wife one day I'd buy it for her, and then they see it and they start laughing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, but honestly, I get right into the history of it because during this time, Tampa was one of the more progressive cities in Florida. There was a huge sit-in at the Woolworth downtown, and it changed everybody's opinion on segregation. Central Avenue, which honestly, that's just a hub of a lot of African-American history. And the Jackson House is where they all stayed. It's amazing.
Yeah, unfortunately, when they built the interstate system, they had to remove Central Avenue.
That's a lot of that urban renewal,
But even stories from my grandfather back in the 60s and the civil rights era, there was a lot of like cohesive effort to come together.
This was definitely more of a kumbaya kind of place compared to many others.
I wonder why.
Tampa's always been a kind of a progressive spot. You think about the immigration,
right.
back like
we've
you
always had a
mentioned,
mix of culture. Really.
Gangs of New York, like you mentioned, no Irish need apply, and there were Irish working in Ybor as well. I mean, sure, they didn't have their own social clubs the same way most of the other ones but they were allowed. Spaniards, Italians. I mean, these were people that in different cities they were like, we don't want Italians around here.
Yeah, MLK stayed at the Jackson House too. Check out that picture.
Did he really?
Fox 13. It was a picture of MLK.
Yeah, I know he did some work on Central Avenue, but there's a picture.
Could be close to restoration. Let's just click that article and see the date because they've been talking about.
I know this has been a subject for a long time.
2023.
2023.
Okay. New article. Okay. We got some progress, people.
Wow.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
I mean, then the names
they've got to figure that out. It's
the names keep going.
Like
it's amazing how many B.B. King. I mean, you can name almost anybody in music that you knew back in the height of African American music in America, like just after the jazz and blues trend, and they stayed here.
It's incredible. I think you're right, though. I think that when people were immigrating to this area, places like New York were so overfilled with culture and people that this was, like you mentioned, like a second Manhattan, like a second melting pot where you could go as an immigrant to this country
and feel like you're part of America.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is too, like, a lot of them that came this way, they were, they were like, I've heard of New York, and that's it. And then they're like, there'd be people that Mr. Ybor hired to go up to Ellis Island and be like, if you're looking for work in America, migrate to Ybor City. They're like, what's that, like 5 miles south?
Right.
So they were like, I'll hop on a boat and go to Ybor. And then they arrive here, they're like, geez, I've been on a boat for like 12 days.
They're like, this isn't Long Island. What the hell is
exactly,
this place?
Right? Yeah.
God, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it was
they had no idea.
Boat. Mm-hmm. You were. I don't know how long the train ride would take. I'd imagine a week. I don't know, days for sure. And the whole time you're thinking, what the hell?
Where am I going?
And then you show up in the swamp. I love it.
Exactly.
So what's the story with these children rolling cigars? Children rolled cigars in the factory.
You'd get an apprenticeship by the time you were like 10.
It was just
boy's got a cigar right in his
Your
mouth.
dad rolled them, and you roll them.
Pretty much, that's how it goes. I mean, literally, you would get a job by the time you were 10 because, your job was as soon as you could walk, you could work. Back then, now, of course, you got a kid. You're like, no, I'm just going to nurture him, and you can go to college. You can be an artist if you want to. I have kids, too. I'm the same way. I'm like, whatever you want to do, buddy, you can do it. Back then, though, they were like, oh, you're able to walk? Okay, grab this shovel, go clean the outhouse. So they were like, I'll roll cigars. I don't want to clean the outhouse anymore. Yeah. I'll get a job rolling cigars.
Look at him smoking it, too.
I know, it's great. Well,
look at the faces. They're completely over it.
But tell you what, though, this is better than the kids in the coal mines. And those kids in the coal mines were dead by the time they were 25.
Well, if you're 6 years old and you have to pick a career, I guess cigar rolling might not be so bad compared to.
Plus, you get to hear some
chimney
stories.
Sweeping.
Yeah, the lectors in the factories, you get to hear some stories. You sit there, while you're rolling cigars, they're reading you, the Count de Monte Cristo or whatever,
That's the reason why they had the first trilingual newspaper, right?
La Gaceta,
They had to
from the
read
Manteiga
stories
family.
to all the people working in the factory.
Pretty amazing. And Patrick Mantega's still keeping the tradition alive. Every Friday they have a new edition. I'm happy to say that he's a friend of mine, and he's put me in that paper a couple times.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Shout out to that man
Patrick
right
Manteiga, shout out to him.
Patrick Manteiga. Now, is he a generational owner?
Yep. His father, Roland, was like the famous article writer of As We've Heard It. Pretty much maybe the first gossip column in all of history of Tampa, Florida. He would go around town and he'd kind of hear, actually, he didn't even have to after a while. He had a table. God, I don't want to get this wrong. He had a table at one of the big restaurants. It might be La Tropicana or something, but he had his own table. People would come to him. He'd just sit there and have coffee and smoke cigars, and people would literally go, Roland, I have a story for you. And he'd, okay, let me write that down. And then he'd do a little research on it kind of thing.
Wow.
And now Patrick, of course, his son, and then his grandfather was the one that started La Gaceta.
Can you see when La Gaceta was first founded or the first articles written? Do you know, Max?
It was in the 20s, I want to say.
In the 20s?
It might be before then, though, because I think they actually just celebrated 100 years.
Really incredible that the same family's still writing this newspaper. Thank God, right? What a big piece of Tampa history, La Gaceta.
And they're a really great family, honestly.
And they've got some incredible archives, too.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Some of those old articles. Think about the time.
1922.
Yeah, 1922.
I will say, if you could get this pool and get him on, I don't know how much Patrick likes to talk on podcasts. He's kind of an old school guy, but he has stories. I mean, I sit down with him and we have cigars, and I'm just like blown away by some of his stories.
We heard it.
He's met and had dinner with Fidel Castro.
Oh my gosh, fascinating.
I'll let him tell the story if he wants to, but man, my eyeballs were popping out of my head while I was listening.
Well, what's really interesting about the whole Cuba thing, right? Obviously, right now, an American can't visit Cuba. There's a trade embargo. There's all these restrictions. If you think about it, Tampa had a very close relationship with Cuba throughout its history.
Much different than Miami.
Oh, yeah.
The Miami history with Cuba is almost kind of like a civil rivalry. Like they're almost the same place, but they hate each other kind of thing. But Tampa, and we were the place of independence for Cuba. We were a spot where Jose Marti led the revolution. This is where they found the American dream. They had the Cuban Club. They had everything they can imagine right here in America. This was when also a time when they were under Spanish rule. So, I definitely, by the way, encourage you guys should get a subscription to La Gaceta. And I get no kickback from them or anything. It's just worth it. Keeps you kind of in the know of what's going on in Ybor City.
Look at the old articles in the background they have posted up.
I know, yeah. It's
fascinating.
But yeah, Tampa's history with Cuba is much different than Miami. You know, when the cigar industry crashed, most of these Cubans were like, look at all the money we have. Let's go back to Cuba. Let's go home. We have all this money. Let's go home. And then New Year's Eve, 1959, Fidel Castro does a revolution, takes over the place. A couple years after that, starts exiling as many people as he could. This is also the same time that Miami was developing. And they just went to Miami, this new developing town, and they turned it into their little Havana. So most of the people that go to Miami or are from Cuba and went to Miami, they have almost a bad taste in their mouth about what happened.
Right. They came to America and Miami specifically out of like a necessity, kind of a refugee thing.
Whereas and it was kind of the same.
Tampa, it was for opportunity.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, it was more opportunity. I mean, a lot of them were also exiled that headed to the Key West because of the Spanish rule in Cuba. I mean, this was a time where, like, a Spaniard, if you were a Cuban in your home island and you looked at a Spaniard with a dirty eye, you could be thrown in jail. But then you come to Tampa and now you're rolling cigars next to a Spaniard. And you're like, yeah, man, oh, you're from Asturias? Yeah, that's, like, it doesn't matter. We're the same. We have the same house. Right. I make more money than you kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating, man. I mean, and then I remember when, I think it was it Trump when he first got elected, kind of undid whatever restrictions there were on Cuba?
Yeah.
You could take a cruise from Tampa to Havana.
Obama lifted everything. And the Rays played a baseball game.
I'm sorry.
Obama lifted everything there where you could go from Tampa to Cuba, and the Rays played a game down there. I don't know if you remember.
The Rays played a game in Cuba?
I actually made a joke. I was like, it's not fair because the Rays have Gatorade and the Cubans are just drinking Café con Leche. But,
keeping them going.
So the Rays did win the game, of course. But yeah, the Rays went and played down there. Obama opened up all kinds of stuff. And as they opened up stuff with Cuba, I started getting a big flux of people coming down here like, I kind of want to learn about it.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, Trump shut the door on it. And now, actually, even if you're from a different country, if you visit Cuba, you have to get a whole different set of visas just to come to America.
Oh.
Because I don't really know what's going on. I don't want to speak outside of what I know. But I know a friend of mine from Germany came to Cuba like 3-4 years ago. And then she was coming to visit. And she's like, no, they held me there for an extra like 2 days because I had to get all these visas done. They were like, what are you doing? Why do you have this Cuban thing? She's like, I just went there. I'm German. I'm allowed to do that. And they were like, yeah, but you can't come into America with this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because she visited Cuba.
Because she visited Cuba.
Weird. Yeah, it's complicated.
It's
know.
very...
International politics. Like, there's probably a long story there.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But what's the deal with the Cuban soil in Ybor City?
Yes, so La Casa de Pedroso, Jose Marti Park. You can look up Jose Marti Park or Casa de Pedroso. When Jose Marti was in Ybor City, he was drumming up the revolution here, getting funds. He actually raised more money here than anywhere else. And he also recruited a lot of soldiers that came from Ybor City to fight for the Cuban Revolution. And that's the park right up there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Isla Cuba.
Isla de Cuba, yeah, a little bit higher. These two actually, that's the entrance right there, and then that's inside of it.
Cuba without a passport.
That's it, perfect. Boom, there it is. So when the actually Jose Marti, when he came here, he gave a couple speeches around town, and 2 Spaniards one time when he was in the Cuban club poisoned his wine, and he spit it up. He almost died, and he realized like, dude, I gotta be more careful while I'm here. He forgot that there was a lot of Spaniards in the area. So he decided, well, from now on, I'm just going to like take every dollar I have and send it to Cuba for weapons and supplies, and I'm going to sleep on the streets. I'll just hide in alleys and stuff like that. Until a family called the Pedroso family took him in. They decided, you can stay with us. They gave him everything he needed. They cooked his favorite meals. Roberto Pedroso would sit outside his bedroom with a shotgun across his lap, like, no, you're safe here. So eventually, when the revolution was successful, in 1953, way down the line, Batista, the former dictator of Cuba, he wanted to, turn that into a museum, like the Jackson House. He wanted to turn La Casa de Pedroso, which, if you look that up, it's probably a really old, ugly photo of an old house. La Casa de Pedroso.
But it's still standing?
No. What happened was they were like, there's too many termites. A fire happened while they were trying to restore it. And they were like, just knock it down. And they built that park instead. It's Pedroso, I believe. Pedroso, yeah. La Casa de Pedroso. Yeah, that's perfect.
But there's photos of it.
I believe there are photos of it. Yeah, Paulina Pedroso. That's definitely the one. Might have to
scroll down.
Find one. Yeah, see, they turned it into a park.
Okay, but, so this house sat on.
It was right there where the park is. So they decided, knock the house down, build a park. And while they were building the park, the Pedroso family themselves signed the deed of the land over to the nation of Cuba. And that's the way it stands right now.
Fascinating.
Cuban owned. That's it right there. Right there, that old wooden house.
Wild, man. Look at that. So this goes deeper than just some cheeky little like, oh, yeah, it's a part of Cuba. No, they actually deeded the land.
They have the deed of the land in Havana, Cuba.
Oh, my God.
USF has more information on it than I do, but that's where I got a lot of the information from. USF has a great archive section over there, and they helped me out quite a bit.
Well, I was actually, I'm obviously fascinated with this stuff, Tampa history, culture, all this sort of stuff, and I've noticed that website. They have a history archive. They have incredible old photos on there.
Incredible. I get a lot of my information. When people ask me questions that I'm not too sure about, yeah, look at that old picture. That's great. That's when I go to USF for most of my information.
Do you know what happened after that? Was the United States like, yeah, that's not going to happen?
So, no, they were fine because this is 1956. Cuba was our best friend back then. Batista, right. Cuba was like our little brother back then. But after Castro took power, he kind of turned his back on it. And a local Cuban lawyer for a while maintained it. And then eventually it became part of the Parks Department. And now today, it's still part of the Parks Department.
So it's owned by the city.
It's owned by the city. Well, maintained by the city of Tampa, owned by Cuba. Yeah.
I love it, man. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. When there was all that political turmoil in Cuba, like SOS Cuba.
That was a couple years ago.
A lot of the local Cuban people went there and were hanging out and flying the flag.
See, now, of course, they've built a couple condos there. Casa Ybor, Daryl Shaw built a couple condos there, which is great. I like that people are coming this way. But the problem is most of the people moving this way don't know the rules. And they'll start throwing seeds off the back of their thing. And I got to remind everybody, if you're listening, do not feed the chickens of Ybor City.
They got plenty of food around here.
They eat the bugs, the worms, they eat cockroaches. And if you feed them, they start to kind of get a little too close to the humans. And even though they're protected by law, it's not a good thing to have them coming up to your baby and trying to like get food out of its hand. That's not a good thing.
Why are there so many chickens around Ybor City?
The chickens and the roosters of Ybor are descendants of the original ones that came here with the immigrants as a food source. Also a source of entertainment. They were kind of into gambling, if you know what I mean. Anyway, as Ybor went through its economic ups and downs, people left Ybor City, as we talked about, started heading around, and you couldn't travel with a rooster under your arm. So they just opened their back gate, and they were like, good luck, buddy. And considering how tasty the birds are, they're very resilient. They just kept having babies. Now there's like 200 or 300 of them that wander Ybor City. They have free range of the entire town.
Are they protected by the city?
Yes, they have civil rights. If you grab one for dinner, it's like $500. I think it's more than that now. It's like $800.
Oh my God. Protected species here.
They are good-looking birds.
Certainly not in danger. They're thriving.
No, they're thriving. And I tell people all the time, you can take photos, you can take videos, but remember, they are descendants of fighting cocks. Like I wouldn't go trying to pick one up. He might, come at you if you get too
they're
close.
wild, man.
They're wild.
Spurs. Those things are aggressive.
They are.
One of them chased me around a parking lot one time.
Telling you, they don't mess around. Especially you go near their babies, they don't like that.
So they were just descendants of people, I don't know, having what, like a hen coop and having eggs?
Yeah, you got to have food. And then they, like I said, they also were breeding them for fighting because back in the day there was a lot of gambling in Ybor. And, these champion cocks just kept having babies.
100 years later, they're still hanging out.
These aren't your Purdue chickens that are like in a factory somewhere. They're good-looking
like
birds.
Tampa Mafia chickens, man. They got some juice to them. That's hilarious. I feel like everyone comes here, right, who has never been here before. They go, dude, what's up with all these chickens? That must be a question you get asked all the time.
That's the number one question. And the number two question is, have I ever met the shoe licker? I hate that question.
The shoe licker?
I don't even want to talk about it, really. There's like this guy that one time he was a little kooky, and he would ask people if he could lick their shoes. And it's like an urban legend, but it's very real, and I know who he is. He's a human being. But people will ask me all the time, have you ever met the shoe licker? I'm like, yes, next question. I just don't want to.
That's how often the question comes up. You're just sick of it.
Yeah, it's mostly the nightlife people. I get it on the Ghost Tour more than anything else, because most of the history people don't care about that. But the Ghost Tour, they're in there. Some of them are inebriated already when they get on the tour.
I've been in that building, the Cuban Club, a few times over the last year. Meetings, whatever it may be, association events. It's a creepy place.
If I've ever been in a haunted building, it's the Cuban Club of Ybor City. In fact, if you want to pull up our Instagram, it's Ybor City Ghost Tour. On the Instagram there, and I have tons and tons of photos that people will send me, or we'll just get them right there on the tour. There it is right there, Ybor City Ghost Tour. So, obviously there's some promotional stuff. Look at that one. That's the ticket booth of the Cuban Club right there. That's my fingers as I zoomed into the photo. That's not photoshopped or anything. That's literally somebody in the ticket booth that has a vest, and it looks like a Halloween decoration.
That's insane. That's crazy.
And look, you see Elena Fuente over there, and she's commenting on it. We've had a lot of people that are Ybor royalty come through these tours. They want to get these stories from the real people.
There's so much depth to the history here in Ybor and in Tampa in general. I would imagine even if you have lived here your entire life, this tour, you're going to find out stuff.
They love it.
And
there's other tours around, but we are the legit tour. We've been doing it a long, long time. We are the only tour that has a key to the Cuban Club. We are the only tour that can bring you into Jose Marti Park at night. And it's definitely a privilege and an honor to be able to tell, Tampa legends some stories like this.
What exactly is the Cuban Club? Like, what's the connection? We were talking earlier about Cuba and the history. Like, why did they build this? Because it's a magnificent building. It's beautiful.
One of the many social clubs of Ybor City, because the immigrants that came this way, like I said, they got along well, but you still long for the old world you came from. So they wanted a place where they could, sing their songs that they grew up singing and eat the foods they grew up eating. They all started building social clubs like the Cuban Club, and actually over there, Centro Español, there's like places that these people could be themselves. After a long day of speaking broken English and trying to communicate with people around it, they could go in there and speak the slang they grew up speaking.
So we have the Italian Club, which is a beautiful building right here on 7th, the Cuban Club. I know there's a German club.
On Nebraska, it's a clinic now today. In Centro Studiano, great place as well, up on Palm. It's on Nebraska and 10th Avenue. And then Centro Español, which was it's where the Improv Comedy Theater is right now. These are all places where they could be themselves. They no longer had to put on this fake smile. And it also, not only that, it offered them things like they would do English lessons there. They had, your birthday would be there. And they had health care for the people. From cradle to grave, for 25 cents a month, you had a doctor that would take care of you. So it was very important to these people. Now,
almost like an embassy back in the day, in a
yeah,
sense, right?
but at the same time, you'd be gambling was in there. You'd go there. They had theaters. There was everything you can imagine. They had anything you could want, and they always had something for you to do. So now the Cuban Club was named by the Travel Channel 4th most haunted building in America, top 5. And the Ghost Hunters, if you've ever seen that show, they came there and said there's at least 150 ghosts in it every night.
They're like, this thing's overrun, bro. Like, you got to get out of here.
I say it's kind of like, the Disney Haunted Mansion, but for real.
Now, why would it be so haunted? Why that building in particular?
Well, a couple reasons. Number one, the Cubans that were here, they had a very thin veil between life and death with their religions. A lot of them are Catholic. They also practice a thing called Santeria. If you could see things that are all over the place.
Oh, weird. Looks like someone's jumping on the stage. Look at that.
Yeah, so there's somebody that looks like they're walking up the stage, but that's not a person. That's an apparition. And we get all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, there's videos. Yeah, look at there you go. See them walking up the stage. But these Cubans also, this is a place where they had the best time of their life. They saw their first ever live show. They maybe got their first kiss in the building. And, they just simply don't want to leave.
Is there a basement?
There is a basement. Used to be a gymnasium. Now today it's a cantina. And, basically, there's a very famous ghost down there that made contact with the ghost hunters. I don't want to give away too much of it, but people will come this way and they know right away. They're like, oh, yeah, I want to go to the basement because I saw it on the episode, The Ghost Hunters.
Look at that picture on the left. That's obviously...
Yeah, that's a weird one. I don't even know.
Right?
I don't know. I think that's one of the people that were on the tour, but they seem to have something kind of trying to get into them. It happens quite often. You'll see actually even people that they'll go inside the club and they'll burst into tears. They'll just I don't know why, but I feel like there's a million people trying to speak to me at once. Ooh, weird. What can I say other than it's just a connection you can feel. Now that one over there, that one always freaked me out. That's actually the old hospital, the Don Vincente, which now today is it's not a hospital or a inn anymore, but it was the hospital for a long time. And this was
where is this located?
This is right across from Mr. Ybor's factory. It's on 14th and 9th. And it was the old hospital, the Gonzalez Hospital and Clinic. And the Dead Files went to that building. They showed the Dead Files, and they had a lot of contact as well. But that's a photo of somebody who just died. And I mean, what do you see there? That's literally a soul over the body.
Creepy. What is the building used for now?
The Don Vincente. So what I understand is it's rented out by Daryl Shaw. He rents out some office spaces there and things like that. But I think that part of it's owned by the Department of Defense in the basement. And I've asked Daryl and a couple people about why they're doing that, and they won't tell me much. So if they're not going to tell me anything, I'm just going to say it. They're weaponizing the ghosts.
Yeah, right. That's weird, though. The Department of Defense are using the basement of a building in Ybor City.
Trust me, I've tried to pay them to let me know what's going on in there. They're like, no comment.
Interesting.
But we go to several buildings. We used to go into Rox Brothers when that was open, and if it does reopen, which we have our fingers crossed, we will go back in there. And it's just an amazing. Our tour was voted best ghost tour in Florida. And there's your King Greco right there. Our tour was voted best ghost tour in Florida by TripAdvisor and U.S. Traveler Magazine. It was best ghost tour in America. And what was the other one? We were named top 10% attractions worldwide by TripAdvisor.
Amazing.
Worldwide. That means you go to London.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much. We go to London and you can't get... There it is right there. Top 10% attractions. That was 2022. We actually just got it again for 2023.
Amazing.
But very, very proud of what we've built around here.
If you think about a lot of the old cities in America from around the same time period, right? Savannah, Charleston, they also have this crazy, rich ghost history, all that sort of stuff. I don't know. Maybe there's some weird connection between those two cities in Tampa. There must be, right?
I think that though, Ybor especially, and Tampa too, these are places that just had some sort of a different kind of energy to them. Savannah is known as one of the most haunted cities in the South, but Ybor's history and hauntings, for some reason, I feel like it's so deeper. I mean, also, Ybor had that mafia history.
Right.
All these, mafiosos that were coming down here, wreaking havoc on the town. These are people that put all their hopes and dreams into the American dream of Ybor City, and they found it, and then it got snatched away by the black hand of the mafia. So the energy's still kind of lingering around there. Not to mention all the wild hits that happened here. Yeah. There's all kinds of different torture that happened around this place too. Not to mention, even you go further back in my downtown tour, like I said, we talk about the slaves, the Native Americans. There was genocide in this area. So it's not uncommon that there would be so much haunted history in the Tampa Ybor area.
And you would imagine, because Tampa was probably kind of low key, not a lot of people knew about it.
Best kept secret in the South.
100+ years ago, some of those gangsters from New York, I bet you they came down here to do some dirty business.
Guarantee. Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, the biggest name, of course, is Santo Trafficante Jr. He ruled this place for decades. Scott probably talked plenty about him. But even like weird characters like Charlie Wall, who was not like an immigrant that came from nothing to something. His dad was the mayor of Tampa. He was a very wealthy kid growing up, and he just wanted to be a gangster. And he did. He ran this town. There was, a time when you couldn't get a job in City Hall without the okay from Charlie Wall. He had every judge and politician in his pocket. He ran Bolita. He was the kingpin of Bolita, and he also was known as the White Shadow because he'd wear a fresh white suit. Yeah, the White Shadow, fresh white suit every single day.
He was brutally murdered too, wasn't he?
He certainly was. I don't know if Scott brought it up, but I can tell you the story.
Yeah, tell that story. Pull that up. Pull up the Charlie Wall story, Tyler. That
Charlie
guy.
Wall, Tampa, yeah.
And like you said, what a weird transition from like, dude, your dad's the mayor, you're a business owner.
Oh, he could have been a scientist. His dad was a scientist. His dad was the one that discovered that yellow fever was being caused by mosquitoes. So he was like a hero in Tampa because yellow fever was killing everybody.
Look at this.
Yeah, look at that.
Charlie Wall's body is carried from his home after he was murdered. 1955.
Yep. Actually, I think that photo might be from 1955, but I'm pretty sure he died in 54, or at least that's what it says on his grave in the Oakland Cemetery. But, some of those things can be off.
Back to that cemetery, that's incredible. This guy, Charlie Wall's born there. And who else did you mention? Some other
John Wall, McKay, Mr. Ybor, and not to mention there's mass graves there from yellow fever, from the Civil War, and there's 2 pirates that are buried there.
Really?
Yeah, it's an amazing cemetery. That's why I save it for my last stop, of course. But yeah, Charlie Wall. Yeah, look at that.
There's the gravestone right there. Look at this guy. He just looks like a gangster.
Oh yeah, man. But he was also a wild person. So I hate to kind of badmouth the dead and all that, but after he lost all his power to the Trafficante and Tenori families and stuff like that, he kind of he went crazy. In fact, he was no longer called the King of Bolita or the White Shadow. His new nickname around town was Crazy Old Charlie, because he'd go around and go like, "Hey, everybody, I want to buy your drinks tonight. Just I want you to hear my stories. I want you to know who I used to be around here." Become that crazy guy that's at the bar. It's like, great, Charlie's talking again. And then eventually, you see that picture. That's actually perfect. Eventually, there was a congressman named Kefauver. He wanted to shut down the mob, which is also part of The Godfather 2, if you've ever seen the movie. Called all these guys to testify in front of Congress, went to Baltimore and Kansas City, Chicago. When he came to Tampa, he called Santo Trafficante Jr., and he found the first boat to Cuba. He wanted no part of that. But the second person he called, Crazy Old Charlie Wall, who loved to tell his stories. And he knew Congress was going to listen to every word he had to say without having to buy a drink. So he stood there on national television, talked all about the murders of Tampa and Ybor, who was pulling the triggers, who was giving the orders. And then, of course, a couple years after that, his wife comes home from work, finds his head beaten with a stick, his neck was slit ear to ear, and birdseed sprinkled all around his body because he sang like a canary, chirped like a bird.
So he said
stool
too much.
pigeon. Yeah,
took him out.
It's the old tagline for a mafia snitch, this bird seed all around him.
Because 1950s, like 54, mid-50s, that's a little late for the mafia, right?
Well, this was the time when they were building all those, it does say 55. That's my bad. But yes, it was a time when they were building all those casinos in Cuba in the 40s and 50s. And that's kind of how Trafficante ended up coming this way. Because, Luciano, that's an Italian man. He doesn't speak much Spanish. Meyer Lansky was a Jewish man. He spoke almost no Spanish, but they wanted to open up casinos in Cuba, also part of The Godfather 2. And they had this guy, this right-hand man, Santo Trafficante Sr., Cuban-Italian, spoke it fluently, dual citizenship and all that. Him and his son, Junior, were down there kind of helping out in Cuba. And they were like, you guys should check out Tampa again. There's a lot going on there. Like, yeah, no, we used to run some rum out of there during Prohibition, but not much going on anymore. Like, no. Go see it. They saw what was going on. They're like, no, we're taking over the town. And Charlie was like, this is my hometown. I'm not backing down. And there was a ton of blood all around this place. Yeah, there was, I think, an era of blood from the 40s to the 50s.
He looks a lot different in some of these pictures, him testifying for crimes.
Right.
Now, I don't know. There's probably some time in between these photos.
Yeah.
But he did not look so good towards the end.
Well, he also is, well, it's rumored that he was very addicted to heroin too. But
No, that didn't help.
no, but he definitely he aged rapidly after he lost his power. And I think that's also why he testified. He kind of knew, he's like, I'm at the end of my rope. I got nothing else to do here. So he just decided to go out with a bang, literally.
And what's wild is 1955, he was murdered. Think about how long the mafia, organized crime, et cetera, all this crazy stuff we've talked about was active here in Tampa for
Long
50
before
years before that.
early
right?
1900s.
What a crazy place this was, man.
Oh yeah, man. This was and there's John Wall. Yeah, this is
Now, John Wall was his father,
right,
former mayor of Tampa.
right. And also scientist, and he helped put all the mosquito nets around Plant Hotel and stuff like that. He was a hero, John Wall. And John Wall, yeah, that's his grave right there, Dr. John Perry Wall. And Charlie's is just a tiny little thing next to it.
Is he also in the same cemetery?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. They're buried by each other. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. 1836. Now, do you know, was he born in Tampa?
I don't think so. I'd have to look that up.
Probably
but I don't
not,
think
right?
so.
Because at that time, really, that was when you mentioned earlier, like there was like 600 people here.
Yeah.
No one was
in
living
1836, especially. It might have been 150.
Right.
Almost nobody here.
here. If that, right? No
Right.
real permanent, establishment.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, man. There's so much history and culture here. Why do you think that, obviously New York gets more attention, it's a bigger market, but even in movies like The Godfather, I don't remember them mentioning Tampa.
So they don't, but they do mention it in Goodfellas.
Yeah, they come down
Donnie
here.
Brasco.
I think they come down here to bury a body.
Yeah.
At Lowry Park Zoo or something.
Yeah, they
like that.
threw him to the lions, that
Yeah,
kind of thing. But let's see, what else? Boardwalk Empire.
The Ben Affleck movie.
The Ben Affleck movie. So Tampa's kind of like I said, one of the best kept secrets in mafia history.
Yeah.
If you go to the Mob Museum in Vegas, which Scott is part of, I think he's one of the main people that work there. They have a huge dedication to Tampa, Florida, and really one big face there, Santo Trafficante Jr. But they do have information about all these different families. I think Charlie's mentioned there too. The Mob Museum in Vegas is very much worth seeing. And Tampa, I think, though, like I said, it's one of those things that like everybody knew about Kansas City, in Baltimore, and Chicago, and all these places. But Tampa was like very hush hush. It was, however, the #1 port for Caribbean rum during Prohibition. It also was the #1 port for narcotics during the turn of the 20th century. And it was said to bring in some of the finest prostitutes of the South.
This place has always been the Wild West. Bro.
It has, man.
And what's so funny, too, growing up, right, like in the 90s, whenever you talk to someone outside of Florida about Tampa, all they think about is like, okay, strip club, Burns Steakhouse,
Yep.
Mons Venus. So we've always had this like rough around the edges.
Yeah, I like to say
Vegas
that.
of the South, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, I put it like this. I call it like Miami without the Miami bullshit. It's got beaches, it's got strippers, it's got good food,
right?
But it doesn't have like the wildness, that Miami is.
No neon lights.
No, yeah, less neon lights because 2001
Mons Venus, right?
Yeah, those places.
Well, dude, this has been awesome. I
This has
appreciate
been fun.
you coming on again. How can people find your tour? Instagram? How do they
So
follow
the
along?
Instagram, Ybor Walking Tours, that's for that one. Ybor City Ghost Tour, the Downtown Tampa Ghost Tours on Instagram that I want you to follow as well. But overall, if you want to find our website, it's tampabay-tours.com. So Tampa, it says right there at the top, tampabay-tours.com. That'll pop up with everything you need to know. There's even some photos and all that. And honestly, man, you guys will see me around Tampa. Just ask questions. I'm always around.
Look for the hat. You got to get that hat back on.
I know, man. I was a little sweaty this morning, so I had to change into my backup. But I'm rocking my Berry House shirt.
And hey, now's the perfect time of year, man. The weather's nice.
Oh yeah,
we're in spooky season.
It's great. Come on this ghost tour. They're selling fast. They are selling fast. But we're year round. Come anytime you want.
All right, Max, you the man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, bye, everybody.